Welcome back. I've got Scott Alldridge on the line. Scott, how are you?
Doing well. Glad to be here today, Michael.
I'm glad to have you here because the work you do is critically important, has always been important, but even in this day of AI, it's even more important than ever. So why don't you share a little bit about you and then we'll jump in the conversation.
Sure, yeah, I'm kind of a career IT technology, cybersecurity person. Of course, we didn't call it cybersecurity back in the day, not to date myself too much, but I've been in this space for about 30 years, and the last 10 years really hyper focused on leading with security first and cybersecurity. And so we've been involved in some pretty interesting things over the years, rolling out a lot to middle-sized businesses, some small, and a few enterprises. So we're a little all over the place, but the kind of that mid-tier is a lot of our clients. And we deal a lot with manufacturing, healthcare, and then finance. We've worked with banks and credit unions a lot, but more even we're going more to the financial services realm. So that's my IP services company. And back in the mid 2000s, kind of the team that I cherry picked out of another group, a set of franchises from MicroAge Inc., which was a Fortune 500 out of Tempe, Arizona, actually. Out of our locations, we cherry picked kind of our best and brightest, and they really cared a lot about certain IT processes and documentation. And we started into a journey in the mid 2000s to do some research and benchmarking and prescriptive guidance. We launched the IT Process Institute as kind of a sister organization and wrote a book, a handbook called the Visible Ops Handbook, based on ITIL, the IT infrastructure library, kind of married to best practices, and released a series of books back in the 2000s into the teens, the 13, 14 time range. And those books sold hundreds of thousands. We sold like 300,000 copies of those books. Crazy vendors that we partner with, HP, Red Hat, some of your big players at CA. We're kind of joking, throwing them off the backs of airplanes at conferences and stuff. But so that helped move the needle on the number. But we've sold a ton. It's widely recognized and adopted. And then here, a couple of years ago, we kind of launched into another series, updating our Visible Ops cybersecurity book that came out with Visible Ops cybersecurity, not IT security like the original one. And that's the book kind of behind me, you might see. It's now an Amazon bestseller, and it really gets into really leadership and really that IT processes, the efficacy of IT processes still matter. And then it gets into zero trust and some of those elements, thinking about post quantum computing and cryptography and dealing with some of those things. I touch AI just a little bit, but I have a new book that I just released called Visible Ops AI, which is really addressing the area of governance in AI that a lot of companies, and before we jumped on, you hit the nail right on the head, Michael, saying that there's obvious concerns that came from an unofficial study of like 500 companies between 100 and 1,000 employees. And the study was saying that those companies are using about 23 different types of AI. And at that time, so this is about a year old, there's about 130 different types of freemium AIs out there that everybody's using. And the business is applauding it, saying, woo, AI, look at the efficiency, look at all the amazing, and we do all like some of the things it does, but not thinking about the idea of the intellectual property, the confidential information, the risk of not knowing those security policies of the data they're holding, data security. So if you don't have the right kind of AI with the right type of governance and controls, you're a sitting duck these days because we're just a few huge stories. And there's already been some of big breaches. So it's very relevant to cybersecurity. And of course, there's the good guys and the bad guys side of that. Here in cyber, we are using AI to help with, what we call false positives and to get through data. But if you're relying solely on AI for your IT security, I would caution that as well. So the book gets into that and it's pretty good. So that's kind of me. I obviously certified on a variety of number of things. I actually have a master's and MBA in cybersecurity concentration. So that's kind of my world and where I came from and the books that I've written.
Congratulations on your success so far. And yeah, I remember my age, I'm of that age. I
Yeah.
remember, when the dot-com era was born and I rode that wave and had a blast with it, and then reality hit and I'm like, I think I'm going to go back to accounting, and I did for a bit. I'm like, yeah, this IT stuff, man, this is not for the weak, that's for sure. And I learned a lot and loved the work that I did. It's mostly in tech support and things like that, but helped out, rolled out data centers and things like that. So yeah, I don't think I could crimp a cat Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable anymore. Although it probably would take me long. I'm like, okay, what's the order to do this?
Right.
But it's so critically important, and and like there's always good guys, and unfortunately, there's guys and gals that are not so good, and they look at it as opportunities. And with IT, I remember when the Melissa virus came out. Oh boy, was that a fun mess to clean up. And it just, continues. And now with AI, and as you said, it's a great tool. I love using all kinds of different things on it. However, much like when we first had internet access at workplaces, we have to have some guardrails in there, because otherwise all it takes is someone to load up one of could be Copilot, it could be Gemini, it could be any of them, and your employee decides, you know what, I'm tired of crunching these numbers this way. There's got to be an easier way, and they just upload spreadsheets or whatever else to it, which has all kinds of confidential information in it. And yeah, it generates the report real quick, and they look like champion good guy, and like, look how quickly I got this turned around. You just uploaded all this confidential and private information into the wide open, anybody can access it kind of thing. And by anybody, it's like people are going to know what to look for. And having worked in healthcare for about 15 years, I was on all the privacy panels, and it was, I am extreme, even in talking about, if somebody asks, about a family member that they knew had some type of a medical situation, and they, asked me, so how is this family member doing with that? And I'm of the point, like, you need to ask them directly. I'm not releasing that information. I'm not
Yeah.
releasing my own, much less,
Yeah.
unless I decide to. But again, people in healthcare, okay, I got to get some stat reports. What are we seeing in our primary care unit? What about this? And they just decide to upload some stuff that has some identifying demographic information. Next thing you know, not only do you have a breach, but all of a sudden somebody that's really, really upset about their
Yeah.
information just being widely available, well, they're calling one of the daytime attorneys on TV. And next thing you know, you've got not only the
Mm.
breach, you've got countless lawsuits. Could be, there's going to be class action lawsuits coming if they're not already. They're
Mm.
coming because we just decided, hey, this is cool. We'll do this without thinking about the consequences. And that's been the case ever since we plopped down a computer onto a desk. People haven't thought about the consequences of what they type
Hmm.
in or save or upload or anything like that.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a real vacuum, quite frankly, in leadership, especially because it starts with leadership. By the way, I was going to mention, I love your podcast. I've been listening into different ones. Kudos to you, whoever's listening today, man. Go like it, 5 star, follow it, all those good things. Appreciate you having me on. But you're bringing up some really good points. You're getting right to the heart of the issue, and it really, my book gets into and starts with this idea that it really is a leadership problem. It's starts at the boardroom, quite frankly. And so that awareness has to go back up. Forever, IT has a reputation, like other things in other industries, of being over budget, not on time. The CFOs talk about a whistling sound they hear in their office. I had one of them literally tell me, "Do you hear it?" And he got real quiet. That's the suck of IT spend going out the window. Do you hear it? And so we've kind of not done ourselves any favors with some of that. But now the businesses, they kind of think they're too small, or it's obscurity, security by obscurity, or they got hit, but we won't. Or this false sense of security, which is probably one of the biggest things. And I dare use the arrogance word, but it seems almost a little arrogant, over trusting. We love our employees. We know their hearts might be totally in for the best for the business and want to protect the business, but one or two people, they don't know all the threats and things that exist out there, and it's ever evolving and ever changing. And one of the things I talk about in my executive companion book is, you're a candy company. Make world-class candy. You're not a cyber ops organization. So why are you trying to be? And so the specialization to understand the right types of methodologies and ways to roll out the right tooling set, because I joke a little bit in my book about a fool with the tool can still be a fool. So we really have to do the right process thinking and the right strategy in how we roll out our IT security. It really comes down to layers. And we refer to zero trust. There's like 7 pillars in zero trust, and it's really a methodology, and it really does a great job at holistically addressing your cybersecurity posture. So business owners, boards really have to start paying attention. And if you're not, or you're just getting the report we talk about in security, IT security, about trusting but verifying always. And so the same thing's true if you're IT director, or maybe even you have a cybersecurity guy that's kind of his area of focus. We have to trust but verify. So we're asking for the right kinds of reporting, the right kinds of controls. We need the evidence and the proof that they're working. And it's just surprising to me how many business owners probably think it. Like, I hope, Sarah or Mike have it under control. They're sure telling me we're good. And we just bought a new tool that we're spending a little more money I didn't want to spend. And the truth is, another thing in my book is I get a little bit into a Deloitte and Touche study that looks at the overall company size and your IT spend, and then says this percentage of your IT spend really should be on your cybersecurity program. And if you're not, you're kind of out of whack with where you're putting your dollars and your cents. So it's challenging. Sometimes in talking to people, you feel like you're talking about life insurance for a 30-year-old. They don't think they're ever really going to die. They might be getting a family, so they know they might should be thinking about it. So it's a tough world in kind of this idea of awareness around how serious you need to take your cybersecurity program in your business, no matter how small. I mean, we've gotten into business that are sub $1 million of revenue and have been hacked. We fortunately have not experienced that. We come in after the fact, and it's interesting how much the budget opens up and how interested owners and presidents and executives and boards are to spend money once they've actually suffered a breach. So that's a little bit of the problem domain that we live in right now, is that it's getting the awareness. And that's kind of the idea of my book, and really trying to help raise the tide that floats the boats in taking your cybersecurity program very seriously and providing some best practices and guidance on how do you do that?
It brings up a good point. And I remember back, especially in the early days of the dot-com era, and when we were in the States, we were bringing in a lot of people from all over the world because we simply didn't have enough people. And then when things kind of went, the chief financial officers and the people that were spending money were looking at it as a spend, but not as an investment,
Mhm.
started slashing and started outsourcing. And of course, having worked in IT for a while, that bothered me. But my opinion on that's changed a bit. And your candy analogy a moment ago is spot on. You're a company, you make candy, you make the best candy in the world, okay? You're not an IT expert. Quite frankly, you can't spell IT. That's an old joke from a boss that I had many, many years ago. Saying these people can't even spell IT, and I'm like, IT. It's like they can't spell that. Okay, but I understood. I understood what he meant. But it's to the point where, especially when it comes to things like cybersecurity or insurance or anything else, don't
Mhm.
try to do it yourself unless if that's your bread and butter and that's what you do. Okay, but
Mhm.
even I would argue that even as a cybersecurity company, it's like we should probably have an outside point of view on this because sometimes we might be too close to the situation to be clear on that. So it's definitely I've changed my tune on certain things. It's like, what are you good at? What does your company do? Well, we manufactured this, and this. Okay, then that's where you put your focus on. You have external auditors do your financials. You have an external organization make sure that your cybersecurity, your IT, and all that other stuff is there. Insurance, all you have vendors that are specialized in that. Why? Because they're keeping up to date on the ever-changing landscape of things. AI is a great example. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have their internal IT departments, which is great, and they do a fairly good job on it. But if they don't know, and pardon the pun, this kind of tie into what I mentioned ago, they can't spell AI, then you're putting yourself at risk. And I think that's why it's important for organizations and the leaders and the board to go, this could be a problem. And I implore boards and leaders, look, this is all great. It's shiny. It's the brand new thing. Everybody's like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. Yeah, until it isn't. And what I mean
Mhm.
by isn't is all of a sudden you just figured out, all of your trade secrets. Somehow your competition now has them. How did they get them? Because somebody uploaded something to one of the platforms and someone was smart enough to go, hey, what does this company do? What's their
Mhm.
secret? And
Mhm.
if it's up there, AI is not gonna like, I probably shouldn't share that unless, I mean, there are guardrails that they build into it,
Sure,
like inappropriate content and things
sure.
like that. Those things more or less are there. I'm sure there's workarounds. I don't look for them because I'm not looking for that crap anyway. But at the end of the day, these companies are, at the risk of one employee that could
Yep,
accidentally
yep,
or intentionally,
yep,
decide to open up the doors and go, okay, here's Coca-Cola's secret recipe.
yep.
There it is. And, then,
It's
then
a
it's
huge
a,
risk. It's
yeah,
it's
big
a
time.
it's a huge risk. A couple of things to put emphasis on that. I tell the story about the MGM Grand about 2 years ago, 3 years ago. You may remember, some folks do. It was in the news. It was big. Somebody basically just imitated that they worked for the MGM Grand in their, administrative department from a LinkedIn name that they had garnered and called into their call center. Now think about MGM, right? I mean, billion-dollar corporation. They've got the who's who of cybersecurity processes. They've got a security operations center and a network operations center and all the teams and all the tools and all the stuff that you need, right? But one phone call to the call center to get his password changed because he had the email address elevated his privilege into the network. Then he invited a couple of these hacking groups that like to come together, the threat actors, to go in and partner up, and they locked out their systems for almost a month, 20 some days. And in doing so, cost the company right at $100 million. And then turn around and they got a class action lawsuit from data that was leaked and exposed for another 49 million. So a little bit tongue in cheek, but one phone call cost that organization almost $150 million. Now that's a big example of an enterprise scenario, but the same thing happens with ransomware. Only 1 in 7 breaches is reported. And that's usually because they're mandated. They're in a regulated that they have to, or we all get the letter later in the mail that, oh, your credit card data or information may have been, exposed and breached. That's because they have to. But all the other ones, the businesses, right, to some degree, the, manufacturing operation of just 200, 300 employees down the road, they very well 1 in 7 get reported. So there's a lot more going on out there. That's a point I like to make. So I think it realizes that everybody's a target of what can happen. You can have the best of everything, but if you don't follow some basic processes, it's easy to circumvent that as well. That's on the one extreme, and on the other extreme, the threat actors are just getting so creative, and the littlest thing that might seem innocuous or innocent is trusting your IT team. There's a financial services company we got brought into that basically realized that the threat breach we tracked it down came in through a new printer that was set up in the accounting office, and the administrative password of the printer that was on the network was left as admin 123. The threat actors found that port open, exposed the port, sat there, watched their whole network, got onto their email, tenant, basement 365, and watched and copied all the emails, used AI to emulate the way they write, the inflection, the tone, the writing style, and convinced the CEO, the CFO, that he got an email from the CFO to make was a $125,000 transfer to a vendor that was not a real vendor. So these are the kinds, and by the way, some stats around all this that businesses rely on to make, more back up the point you're making. 40% of all insurance cybersecurity claims got denied last year. In the last 2 years, the insurance companies have gotten super smart. They're calling out fine print of certain controls and processes. You need to have managed detection, active detection, monitoring going on. They've got that. And if you don't have that, you can't attest that you've got that working and basically document it. They won't pay the breach. The other piece is, statistically, is that we recognize that not only do insurance companies not get claimed, but we also know that 40% of businesses that suffer a breach go out of business within a year. So that's pretty big, 4 out of 10. I mean, that's a high risk game you're in if you're not taking your cyber. And back to the earlier point about boards, all the best practices stuff the last 2 years I've been reading is get cyber experts on your boards. Get those people that truly understand, not just Mike or, Karen, who used to run IT and she knows quite a bit about technology. Most boards have that person, but they really aren't up to speed with the latest, greatest understanding of what threats might exist or really analyze risk ask the right questions of the CIO or the CTO or the VP of IT or the cybersecurity group, right? Really important at the board layer. And I'm working with a little bit of board advisory stuff myself on that particular domain, sit on a couple of boards, actually open to looking at a couple other boards as well. But that's something that I think is a really needed area is getting the right experts in the room at the executive and the board layer.
Wholeheartedly agree with you on that one, on everything you said, but definitely on that is I think boards need to make sure that they have people like that, especially now. I mean, it's always
Mhm.
been a case, but now there should be, if you're, any size organization, you should have somebody with AI expertise. And it's an ongoing thing. And you look for those people that are constantly studying and learning it to recognize, okay, all it takes is one phone call
Mhm.
and you're in. Or you spoofing. I get, I'll see in my spam folder and one of the email accounts I have for like coupons and discounts and things like that. I have a separate email account for that. It's like I don't want that junking up the accounts that I really look at. But I'll glance over in the spam folder and there's emails that are coming from me. I'm like, I don't remember being schizophrenic. I,
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I have one personality and it tends to be moody. If you talk to my spouse, other people say, "No, you're not moody." I'm like, "You don't know me then." Um, but it's like I see that I'm like, that wasn't me, and it could be anybody. And I saw there was an email that came through the other day. I looked at it and it was like this one actually looks pretty legit. And I
Mhm.
always look, it's like, okay, where's the URL directing to? Okay, what's that? It's like, oh, we got to update this. And I'm like, I don't remember needing to do that. Or it could be something, and this easily happens. You could be expecting an email, a DocuSign or whatever
Mhm.
type of thing, and you go, all right, what's that for? And it could be really close to what you're waiting for. And then you go, okay, are they already in? And
Mhm.
that's a question I ask myself. I'm like, are they already in, or was this just a coincidence? It's like, let's triple check, let's verify. Okay, let's revisit this. It as much as we would love for this to be a set it and forget it, it's not. It is an ongoing thing, like breathing. You have it's cat and mouse.
Yep, yep.
Every day is important, and every day new innovations or new things, new breaches, all this stuff. And all you can do is just continue to make sure you're locked down. And thank you for sharing the cybersecurity insurance thing because I had a
Mhm.
conversation with somebody the other day on health insurance claims and insurance companies. Their
Mhm.
mandate is to deny as much as they can. That's been
Sure.
the case ever since Allstate rolled out
Mhm.
Colossus, their system many years ago. But it's the same thing with cybersecurity because why would insurance companies want to start denying? Well, because the claims started going straight up in the air and they're like, what do we need to do? Well, we need to make sure that they actually are just not saying, well, I'm going to buy a cybersecurity policy and then I'm
Mhm.
good and not do anything.
Yep.
And they realized, as you said, you don't have this setup, you don't have this, you don't have it. Do you even use passwords? It's like bare minimum, which is two minimum, but it's like, do you even have any type of protections going on? And again, they go, well, you didn't. Well, you left the door open, so we're
Yep.
not covering that. And like seeing 4 out of 10 companies go under because of that, is that's that's a lot of people that are now unemployed because of not protecting and doing everything you can. I mean, is there a chance they're going to get through? Of course, but take the necessary steps. And yes, I know that means you're spending money, but where would you want to spend the money? Making sure your business is protected and safe, and you can still serve your customers, or do you
Mhm.
want to pay the attorneys? I,
Yeah.
I
Sorry, you're hitting the paradigm shift, and that really is, we use the term revenue assurance, and that really has to be the paradigm shift right now around cybersecurity. We can't look at it as an expense. Like I'm ensuring and assuring that our systems are safe, our data is safe, our reputation stays intact, our employees' information, PII, personal identifiable information is controlled. Our systems stay up and available because when you're breached, your downtime is expensive. There's just all kinds of elements of the revenue assurance. Yeah, the back to your other point to back up some of the points you're making, 70% of all cyber breaches start at the endpoint, and the endpoint is the user. That's the new endpoint of the network. And so email is the weakest target. That's where it starts. And a lot of times something will happen, a click, a phish, a FIS. You don't really know what happened, but then they get into your network and they're very patient. Matter of fact, average time to detect breaches with the threat actors, because they're getting so smart and patient, they'll sit there for 90, 120, 180 days before they'll do stuff. And sometimes they're data exfiltrating. They're just streaming data off site. Matter of fact, with the onset, and I won't get too distracted this, with the coming of supercomputers and the ability to break encryption, a lot of the threat actors now are just streaming data and they don't ever actually, do the ransomware or go the next step to basically extort somebody for their data back. They'll just copy it and they know someday, about 3 years down the road, what we call Q day, they're going to be able to break that encryption and they'll be able to get all the data. And certainly a lot of that personal identifiable data is still valid, driver's license, social security numbers. It's still going to be worth something. So there's a lot of meat on the bones here to talk about, but yeah, I think we covered it at that level. It's the business taking it serious, trusting but verifying, making sure that the leadership is bought in all the way to the board level. These are really paramount, you know, pieces that are important to your cybersecurity program, looking at it very holistically. And then IT processes still matter. When we wrote the original books, it really came from one of the stats of some research that said 70% of all, 70 to 80% of all IT failure, it was correlated to some unauthorized, untested, unapproved change. So the working thesis of IP services and the visible ops methodology we developed was let's do a really good job with just good old change management as it relates to IT and your assets. And got to know your configurations if you're going to do good change. Or some things that are tied to that. But fast forward to my new book, one of the quips in there is no security breach ever happens without a change or a need for a change. Either I brute force, right? I'm using tools to try to find a port to leak into your network, or I phish and then I make a change to be able to get in and access things or stream data or whatever, or I phish FIs, whatever you, and convince you to click on something to make a change. So change management still matters as we monitor it and control it as it relates to this. So sometimes it's just very common sense that's easy. And the proliferation of hackers, right? I mean, you've got middle schoolers and high schoolers that can buy franchise kits for $500 and they can basically get a set of tools to hack businesses. And then the franchise will jump in and give you an expert to help you, and then they'll split the proceeds. And then you can use their call center, by the way. This is on the dark web. I'm not making this up. They can call the call center and they'll take your crypto because a lot of businesses don't deal in crypto. So they'll convert your bank money into crypto because they want it non-traceable to pay the threat actors. That's what's out there. That's happening, and it's all over the world. If you're connected to the internet, you're exposed to the whole world.
Yep. And it's frustrating to see little kids make more than us, but they are. And because it's there, I wish that they would use that creativity and expertise for something that is less harmful. But that's the world we're in. And the only thing we can do is do our best to protect ourselves. And that's a wash, rinse, and repeat every day, kids. So I love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this research you do?
Yeah, that's great. So my author website is www.scottalldridge.com. That's SCOTTALLDRIDGE.com. And my business connections and everything's connected to that. The other thing I'd like to do for your audience is my Amazon Visible Ops Cybersecurity book was an Amazon bestseller. It's a 415-page cyber book that takes it pretty serious and gets down into some layers. It's not crazy technical. Executives can read it, but I wrote an executive companion edition that is guaranteed to be no geek speak, and it just gets down to some real practical applications. And I sell it on Amazon for $17.95. I'm going to give a business text line here in a second, and you can send an email, but or go to my form on my author website. But then also, I've got just a couple of these I can give away. We use a third party that does our penetration testing because we can't manage cyber for an organization and then tell you we're doing a good job. We got to trust but verify our own selves. We can't grade our own work. So we're partnered with Galactic Advisors, and these pen tests are patented. They're very specialized. They're 2,500 to 10 grand. You can Google it right now. What's a pen test cost? I can do a couple of those for the first couple of people that reach out that send me an email to the text that I'll give you in just a second. And it's non-invasive. It doesn't take down your network, but it'll give you really good report. And you can take that back to your internal team to have them fill those gaps. You can take it to a third party if you're using a provider, an MSP. And certainly my team would love to talk to you about if there are gaps that we can help you with. So here we go. 541-359-1269. 541-359-1269. Drop your email in there. That's important. And we probably will have your phone number from the text. And you can just put secure 26. So again, your email and secure 26, and my team will get back to you. They'll get you a free copy, no cost of the executive companion edition of my book. And for the first couple people that say, I want the pen test, let's put that in the text as well. And we will be sure to lock you in for that. Again, a lot of value there I'm offering, and it certainly doesn't hurt to trust but verify, as I've been saying.
Thank you for that, and I highly encourage people to act on that quickly and get those resources, and maybe you'll be one of the lucky couple that'll get that pen test because I you want to make sure you guys are covered and you have things because everybody thinks, oh, we're covered, and you realize, no, we're not. And it's it's the equivalent of you go outside to go walk your dog and it's a nice day and things like that, and all of a sudden you're thinking, wait a minute, did I put shorts on before I went out? Or it's like, don't be caught without your shorts, folks, and especially when
Yeah.
it comes to IT, because it can cost you a lot more than people laughing at you. So, really appreciate this conversation. Thanks so much for your time, and incredibly thank you for all this important work you're doing. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Michael.